Hello everyone and welcome back to the semifinals of the World Fischer Random Championship. This is game 3, Fabiano Caruana versus Magnus Carlsen. Caruana took game 1, then Magnus retaliated in game 2, and now we're gonna check out game 3. So now Carlsen gets the black pieces in the first game. Without further ado, let's just check it out. And yes, it would seem that whoever plays with the white pieces gets the white chair. So it seems that the mystery has been solved. Now getting back to the game, Fabi opens with f4. We have b6 by Magnus, and it is already as of move 1 that we have a completely new game. Now, I know some of you have been saying in the comments that you don't enjoy Chess 960 or Fischer Random, and yes, I kind of share your feelings, but I don't know, it seems like it's just that I already mentioned this when we were covering some of the previous games from the Fischer Random Championship, that it's like we already went through the opening phase, and now we have a completely new game where already very interesting stuff can happen right from the beginning. So it's similar here, and I don't know, it is very enjoyable. When the players castle, the positions pretty much look like any other chess game. So just wanted to mention that. So getting back to the game, Fabi pushes f5. Pushing the pawn even further with f6, blocking the pawn, and now knight to b3. We have c5, preparing sort of fianchetto both bishops on the queen side. With d3 and d5 by Magnus, grabbing more space in the center. We have knight to g3 and now even e5. So if Fabi doesn't want to allow Magnus to have complete control of the center of the board, he will capture. F captures on e6 en passant. Queen captures on e6, and now queen to f2, developing the queen and making room for the king to castle. Carlsen castles. We have castles by Fabi as well, and already you can see that the position really resembles some sort of a weird opening. We have knight to g6, developing the knight, and now e4, attacking the center. We have d captures on e4, knight captures, and knight to c7. Bishop to h5 by Fabi, and now queen to d5, getting the queen out of the way, so now you can develop the light square bishop as well, and also attacking the bishop on h5. So here Fabi has to decide, does he want to capture and maybe continue development with bishop to f4, or play bishop to f3, which he did, now threatening some very nasty discoveries, like knight captures on f6 check, which would pick up the queen. Magnus retreats, we have queen to d7, and now comes a knight back to g3. Now the bishop is on a very strong diagonal. We have knight to e6 by Magnus, and now bishop to e4, centralizing the bishop. We have bishop to c7, now continuing development, and bishop to d2, probably going for bishop to c3 to get his bishop on this very nice diagonal. We have bishop to b7, opposing Caruana's light square bishop. Bishop captures, we have rook captures on b7, and now rook b to e1. Sort of completing the development. This bishop might still come to c3, we'll see how it goes, and now rook back to b8. He wants to bring this rook over to e8. And here Fabi goes for rook to e4, probably to gain more control over the f4 square. He doesn't want to allow any pieces jumping to f4, and also it keeps an eye on the c4 square. So it's sort of a multi-purpose move, but it also allows Carlsen a very nice idea. So feel free to pause the video and try to find this very nice idea while I give you a couple of seconds. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding such a nice idea. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's f5, which is of course made possible because the move comes with tempo. The rook on e4 is under attack, and now Caruana has to decide whether he wants to capture the pawn or go back with the rook. If you go back with the rook, you kind of have to admit that rook to e4 was a mistake, but capturing isn't all that much better. If knight captures on f5, knight e to f4 now, opening up an attack towards the knight here, and you can't really move it. If you move the knight, then this knight comes to h3 with check, and the rook picks up the queen. So not an option. You would have to play bishop captures, and now after rook captures on f5, there's now a triple attack towards the bishop here. You would have to defend it with g3, but now rook b to f8, Magnus would get insane development and an attack. You would be able to capture on f4 at any point, maybe even push g5. The attack would be overwhelming for white to control. But Fabi, of course, did not capture. Fabi went back with the rook. We have rook to e1, and now rook b to e8 by Magnus. Magnus doesn't want to be over adventurous with f4, although it was possible. f4, knight e4, and now f3. really, all hell just breaks loose. G captures, now rook to f5, preparing to bring the other rook over to f8. But although it is a classical game, it's still only 45 minutes and you don't get increment. There are no delays, so you don't have all that much time to calculate. Rook b to e8 by Magnus, and now bishop to c3, bringing it to this very nice diagonal. We have knight e to f4 now. Still Magnus reluctant to push f4. Bishop back to b2 now, going bishop back to d2, going after the knight on f4, and now rook captures on e1. Rook captures on e1 by Fabi, and now knight back to d5. Now again, the f4 square is covered by both knights and by the bishop, so and by the rook when you push f4, so everything is ready for the f4 thrust. With c4 just attacking the knight, pushing the knight back, knight d to e7, and now comes d4. Hoping to get this d5 move in, but Magnus now finally starts pushing the f-pawn with f4, attacking the knight, knight to f1, and now f3. So what do you do here? You could play g3, but it's gonna be... this pawn will not remain there for very long. Well, you will not be able to capture it back. The rook nicely defends it, and once you play something like knight to c6, capture with the pawn on d4, free the e5 square for the knight, get the knight over to g4, you can kick away the queen from f2, maybe even push the pawn to f2. It's going to be very unpleasant. So Fabi decides to capture with g captures on f3, and now knight to f5, bringing pieces closer to the white king. We have rook to e4. Now the rook helps out with the defense of the fourth rank, and now c captures on d4. We have knight captures on d4, and now knight to e5. Again, bringing more pieces even closer to the white king. We have knight to b5 by Fabi, going after the bishop on c7, but now knight to h4. A very nice maneuver by Magnus. Point is, of course, you cannot capture because knight captures on f3, check, picks up the queen. Very nice fork. So after knight to h4, we have f4 by Fabi. And now knight e to f3 with check, with king to h1, and now we have queen to c6. And here you're putting the queen on this beautiful diagonal. The rook cannot move, otherwise you get some wonderful discoveries. So what can you do here? The rook is under attack. Fabi is very low on time here. Magnus was up on the clock some 10 minutes, and Fabi was already closing in on that 1 minute mark. And it's only move 31. They still need 9 more moves to reach time control. So Fabi played knight back to c3, just defending the rook, but it doesn't work. Why it doesn't work? Well, you are here to decide that. Feel free to pause the video and try to find out why it doesn't work. While I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding out why it doesn't work. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's knight to g5. And now it all makes sense. There's a double attack on the rook. You cannot move it as there's a pin here. So, you know, just you will lose that rook. Of course, the knight cannot be captured because rook captures queen, so everything is nicely pinned. Fabi played knight to g3, added another defender to the rook here, and here Magnus just played knight captures on e4. Knight captures on e4 is a great move. If it wasn't, then there was the even greater bishop to e5, which again, you cannot capture. You cannot capture with this because of rook captures queen, and now you're threatening to remove one of the defenders of the rook and then just grab a clean rook. But luckily, knight captures on e4 is a sufficient move. So knight g captures on e4, and now comes queen captures on c4. So the white king is wide open. There's not much you can do here. Fabi played h3. I wanted to make some more room for the king, and now knight back to g6, piling up on the f4 pawn with f5, but it's not really a threat since the pawn still is unable to capture it. With queen to d3 by Magnus, going for queen captures on h3 check, and now bishop to e3. Fabi defends it. And here Magnus played bishop to e5, and it was in this position on move 37 that Fabiano Caruana resigned the game, and Magnus takes the lead in the match after losing round 1, then winning 2 games in a row. So why did he resign? Well, you don't really have a move, and you are done material. So you could try queen e2 to unpin, for example, threaten pawn captures here, but it's not a problem. Magnus just trades queens, and queen captures, knight captures, now rook captures on f5. You are up a pawn, and you are up the exchange. You have a rook for a knight, so of course this would be completely winning for Magnus. So after bishop to e5, Fabi resigned, and we go into the other game. I don't know if I will have time to cover it today. maybe tomorrow, but I will not spoil the result for anyone in this video. So if you want to know the result, either check it online, or you will have to wait for the next video. But either way, today we are done with classical Fischer random games. Tomorrow we go into the rapid Fischer random games, and then into the Blitz Fischer random games, and it's going to be very exciting to see who goes into the finals of the World Fischer Random Championship. So that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Georgiana Branze, Nedal Mohamed, Matthias Massman, Carl Nielsen, and Alexander Kovalenko for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing this nice coverage of the Fischer Random World Championship, continuing the coverage of the European Team Championship, if there's a nice game or two, and of course checking up on your wonderful suggestions. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.